Well, thank you for being here today. This is Burn the Ship podcast. Pleasure to be joined by Miss Charlotte Allen. We had a
Mhm.
wonderful conversation a couple of months ago. I'm glad we're able to reconnect now. This is Burn the Ship podcast. Our goal here, as always, is to connect entrepreneurs, our audience, with people that can really teach you something about business. Professionals that can help you go all in on your business. And just through our first conversation, I kind of identified that you would definitely be a resource to some of those people out there. So I appreciate your time. I don't want to steal all your thunder. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here on Burn the Ship. That is such a great title for a podcast.
Thank you.
So I'm Charlotte Allen. I am the CEO and founder of Rebel Success for Leaders. And I remember when we were first talking, we thought that was such a cool combo. Rebels and burning the ship, they kind of go together. So, what do I do at Rebel Success for Leaders? I help primarily STEM leaders do one of three things. I help them with driving innovation for growth. I help them with transformational change and how they actually can do that successfully because still today, 70% or more of change fails. And then the third way is to get their leaders in a development mode so that they really focus on their people because the people are the way to success. It's not your spreadsheets or your budgets or your metrics or any of that other stuff. It's really your people on your team. So
Sure,
that's what I do in a nutshell.
sure. So tell me a story, if you don't mind, about kind of what your background is in business and what led you to kind of jump in and burn your own ship and start your own business.
Yep. So I have changed careers twice in a pretty big way. So I started off first thinking I was going to medical school. That was one of my passions. And through the opportunity that I had to really work in the healthcare field, I figured out that wasn't where I wanted to be, right? That wasn't the lifestyle I wanted to have. I wanted to be able to make my own hours. I wanted to be able to be at home with family. When you work shift work, that's not always possible.
Right.
So I thought a lot about that, and I turned to my second career option, which was food. So for me, food, health, healthcare, those are all really primary interests of mine. So food took me down a path that went back to school. It took me down a path that landed me for 16 years at Kraft Foods. Most people know Kraft, mac and
Hmm.
cheese, Oscar Mayer hot dogs, Tang, Maxwell House coffee, all that stuff, Planters Peanuts, a brand that was global. And while I was there, I had a pretty unique opportunity within a corporate setting. So I was able to be placed in these positions where people said, Charlotte, we don't know what we're doing. We cannot figure out what the solution is, but we're going to put you here. We're going to give you an opportunity to tell us what we need to do. And that's essentially what I did over and over and over again. So I got really good at this entrepreneurial skill within a corporate zone, and was able to understand kind of both worlds. I was able to bridge that gap between two parts of an organization or inside an organization and outside of an organization. I was able to say, this is how we ought to do it, or we ought to start over and make something new. So that was that part of my career. And then I had an opportunity to basically go somewhere else. So I essentially went from that to owning my own business. It is probably that entrepreneurial spirit that got really activated while I was at corporate, and I was just in a position to say, this is really what I want to do full time. This is
Sure.
this is so much fun. It's an opportunity to develop on every aspect of who you are. It's an opportunity to create exactly what you want and also be accountable for exactly what you create. So yeah, for me, it's super exciting.
Sure. So where are you located?
I am located in the northern suburbs of Chicago.
And you do work basically, I'm sure, all over the United States.
I can do anything in the US or globally. Yep.
Sure. So tell me, how did you bridge that gap from after you've kind of accumulated these entrepreneurial skills and decided to open your own business, how did you decide where you were going to kind of niche down, like what kind of clients you were going to go after? Because that corporate development of those skills and kind of reinventing those to fit with the mindset of a small, an SMB entrepreneur, owner, operator, person that
Yep.
working within their business is sometimes kind of a rocky road, for people is trying to kind of learn, reinvent that language to kind of present it to small businesses. So what was that experience like for you?
So you are correct. It is kind of a rocky road, and it doesn't always go well, right? Um, I personally believe, and part of my story on each one of those pivots or switches or changes into new industries is you absolutely have to follow what your gut is telling you. So that's probably the number one thing that I have always done is to make sure I go with my instinct. And my instinct was telling me, I don't want to go back, right? I don't want to go back. So then it was a matter of, okay, now what, right? Now what do I go do? And quite honestly, through a lot of trial and error, there is a lot of iteration. I ended up getting to the point where I closed the door. I literally just said, I am not going back. You get to that point where you are no longer employable, right?
Sure.
You can only do this
Absolutely.
for yourself. And then it was, wow, okay, what do I know about being an entrepreneur? Right? I have some like mechanics and details and everything, but what do I know about that? And what I discovered was a whole lot. I mean, the entrepreneur sort of ecosystem, and I use that word because we always used a word about what are all those things that connect to what you do. So if I was in research and development, what was my ecosystem like? Who were the people in it? How did I network? How did I draw people in that I needed support with? An entrepreneur's ecosystem is kind of on another planet, right? They're not the corporate system and the entrepreneur system don't really overlap. And I was fascinated by that. I really didn't understand it was out there. They network differently, they develop differently, they talk to each other differently. So I spent a lot of time at the beginning learning, sort of understanding what the differences were. And I do think that the experiences that I had in corporate helped me with that because I was always in a situation of the unknown, right? I was always in a
Sure.
situation where I had to learn and kind of come up to speed on whatever was going on. So I think the learning is a huge part of it. I think that even though I had an entrepreneurial experience, I was surrounded and buffered by an organization always, right? So this perspective of, okay, now I have to be sales and marketing and development and promotions and logistics and operations and everything else. I'm in a different place. I think that is something that can be really overwhelming for entrepreneurs because there are so many different ways of doing things and there's so many people who want to help you. And I think you can really get to this thing where you're in the midst of a lot of FOMO, like you fear missing out on what the next best thing is. And it's hard when you're learning to pick, the right system or the right tool or the right person to guide you. And I think that a lot of that is still trial and error. A lot of it is still following my gut. A lot
Sure.
of it is still trying to figure out how to combine some of those learnings into something that's really actionable. You
Sure.
have to get down to what is actionable and what will help move your business forward. And I think those are things that people go through quickly or really slowly and painfully and often circle around until they never get out of.
Sure. So where has that landed you so far? Like what types of clients are you working with now?
So the my target, my niche, so you have to niche. People say, well, what am I going to miss if I niche? And I'm like, you have to niche. Where I have personal experience and where I feel like my message and my work speaks the most is within the STEM fields. So that is anything that is science, it's food, it's manufacturing, it's IT, it's healthcare, it's anything that could be considered, STEM. And when I talk with folks, it's really about how do I help them move. So a lot of times these industries are in transition, right? there's an older guard and then there's a newer guard. And like, how are you actually moving these very established organizations with a lot of technology to the new world that we live in today? So that is a bit of that's a bit of a challenge. I think that I can help with just because my experiences are such that.
Sure. So it seems like kind of going through these transitions and iterations of your own business is really what's kind of lended you the skills, is not only like that corporate experience, is that even the iterations of you kind of reinventing your own business has been valuable experience for you. How does that play into your ability to help other small businesses in those transition periods? And what do some of those look like? Like what are some of those growing pains that you help small businesses overcome?
So the growing pains that I would help small businesses overcome would probably fall under the header of um, talent, right? Talent acquisition. How do I bring the right new people on, and how am I sure that that group that I then have is also working well together? Because I think when you're in a large company and you have a lot of people, it's easier to kind of assimilate or not. When you
Sure.
have a smaller organization, every person kind of stands out, and every person is a big deal, right? Every person that you hire or place on your team is unique. So I come at it from Rebel Success for Leaders. One of our key principles is find your voice and your uniqueness
Sure.
and your unconventional selves. So when you have a small business, actually helping that group of people understand how to work together and still retain that brilliance that they bring to the party is one of the big things that we talk to folks about.
Sure. So what do you mean when you say friction is necessary? Like can you explain what that means within your business to us?
Yep. So friction, um, when you talk about innovation, change does not come without a little bit of friction. Either we're uncomfortable about something, we want something we don't have, or somebody else is, kind of poking at us, making us find something, right? So there's a little friction, a little discomfort. The same is true of change. When we are doing a transformation, when we are growing as a company, when we are um, launching new business models or new businesses, there's a little friction because it's unknown. There's a lot of fear potentially that people have, but there's this little edginess of unknown. There's this little bit that helps us move. And without that friction, whether it be in innovation or whether it be in change, whether it be in our personal growth, without that friction, there's really not the opportunity to grow, right? So for me, friction is kind of like that magic ingredient in your recipe. It's the thing that makes your recipe different from somebody else's because it is the thing that helps you move from where you are to where you need to be. And we don't know what that is yet. That's the
Sure.
beauty. For me, that's the beauty of it. We don't know where we're going to end up, but we know it's an amazing place that we're headed.
Sure. So that's really the biggest thing that I want to ask you, that I think our audience and especially myself is interested in, is how do you develop and maintain a culture of friction and innovation within your business?
So friction can be scary. I'll say that at the beginning, right? Many people that you will work with, many people that you're going to hire feel uncomfortable about friction, and it's fear. It's what it's based in, and so many of them will shut down. They prefer comfort. They prefer familiar. They prefer routine. Um, when you hire, so there's a couple of things. When you hire, there's a technique for what's your appetite to this, right? Because no
Right.
business can handle somebody who loves swimming in a tornado all the time, right? It's just not possible from a business standpoint. But I think when you focus, what I always talk to people about is make sure everyone in your organization is focused on who you're serving, whether it be your product or your service or your offering or whatever it is. Who are you serving? And that is the person you need to focus on. And if you're focusing, I always go back to, if you're focusing on the people, the change or this friction it doesn't feel as much about you as it is about what's required for the avatar or the person you're serving, right? It's a bit of detachment or a bit of separation because people feel like change is always directed to them, and that is uncomfortable. But when you think about it from the person I want to impact in the world, the person who needs my offering because they'll be better as a result of it, that becomes a little different. That is more acceptable. And I think that shift is one of the things that we talk about. Whenever, and I also say this, whenever you're in a position that you feel really comfortable, when you can look back and you say, I haven't changed much in a while. I'm kind of happy because it's been this way and I can rest and relax and lay back. Usually you need to ask yourself what you should be doing different. I'm a huge fan of recovery. I'm a huge fan of taking that time to celebrate. But when it lasts too long, then you are lulled into a bit of security that is going to end up, getting you out of friction and getting you out of growth
Sure.
at some point.
Sure. Well, that makes I mean, it makes complete sense when you look at it from the lens, and it's kind of like if you look at it from two directions, because at one direction you're thinking, well, how is the value proposition, but with working with Charlotte, is that she's going to ease you in and out of these transitions within your business to continue to help you sustain your growth. Well, easing those transitions and friction don't sound like they go in the same sentence. Do you know what I mean? But when you explain how you're developing this catalyst for motion within your business, it makes a lot of sense. How does this kind of skill, how does this kind of perception, how does this eye fit into different industries? So like when you go into a different industry, what are some of the things, what are some of those variables that you're looking to kind of, diagnose and say, well, when you're talking about the people, is it salespeople in a sales organization? Is it the actual people that render a service in a service type of business, a mechanic, someone that works in your home, things like that? Maybe you're working with a CEO or professional that's running like a CPA or law office. What are some of those consistent and then also kind of independent variables that you see running into kind of different spheres of business?
Yep. So let's talk about two things with that question. First off, the outcomes that you should see as a business leader, right? So the outcomes you should see are being ahead of schedule, whatever your schedule is.
Sure.
You should be able to get to a position where your team is kind of moving with your vision without you having to have your fingers in it all the time, right?
Right.
So you can actually lead your business versus work in your business. And then oftentimes people see an amazing amount of savings because they tend to fix these kinds of symptoms by adding systems or by adding people or by doing something that requires dollars, right? So they tend to add money where they don't necessarily need money. So that's kind of an outcome basis. And then as you think about what are the variables within various industries, everybody across every industry fails change at 70% or greater rate. Everybody. And almost everybody who fails does not take into account the fact that people are the biggest variable. They are the variable you have to get right. I'm not going to be the one to talk to you about your details of your software integration. I'm not going to be the one to talk to you about the approvals of your medication with the FDA. That's not my job. My job is to work with your team and to make sure that the stuff that you're doing internally or between your team and another organization outside is facilitating that engagement such that you are the best you can be, right? So people are universal. People are the same in any industry. Within a company, most leaders have a sense for which part of their organization they feel needs some help. Oftentimes it'll be, my operations people, aren't coming up with, continuous
Sure.
improvement, right? Or my sales people keep getting stuck in a rut and they don't seem to be doing a really good job of selling. Or my development team, can't come up with really good ideas. What I often find when I get inside or when I do this assessment phase is that it's not necessarily always just one part of an organization. Um, one aspect of an organization can sort of expand into all of it, or it started much bigger and then it got into one part of it. So oftentimes there's an element of sort of leadership from the top. There's usually an element of the dynamic specifically that is happening within a team. And then there's almost always, probably 100% of the time, a dynamic of how that team interacts or does not with the other parts of the organization that they need to be successful.
Sure.
So it's usually three, however that looks for your team. And I don't go in with the prescription, let me just say that, because I believe that it's unique. There are common themes, but it is unique to your organization. So I don't want to give you something that's not useful.
Sure. Sure. That makes a lot of sense. Do you consume a lot of like growth and business media? Like I see your book behind you. Do you read a lot of business books, listen to a lot of business podcasts? Do you kind of ingest a lot of that content?
I do consume a lot of content. I will say the content that I consume usually goes across one of three things. I consume a lot of health content because
Mm,
I'm a junkie on like how to get myself into better shape, or like what are
me
the
too.
latest trends, or brain science is my latest thing. So I consume a lot of content around that. I consume a lot of content around business changes. So what's out there? What's the trend? What are people seeing? What's the forecast for what's coming? I consume a lot of those books that folks write to help you understand kind of how to be better at something.
Sure.
So I consume a lot of those. I also consume a lot of development books, and right now those are aged for my son, so it's a little bit more about teenagers.
Sure.
But quite honestly, it kind of helps with connecting that to a lot of the other adult related personal development books that I look at.
Do you plan on putting some content out like that yourself?
I
Well,
don't plan
more,
on
I
doing
guess.
any. I don't plan on doing anything with neuropsych. Well, so I just published. I will say this: I
Mhm.
just published as part of an anthology. So a group of authors. We just published a book on breakthrough to health and vitality. So that got out there.
Wow.
I have a lot of connections from sort of podcast guesting perspective. So putting that kind of content out there, and then from speaking, right?
Sure.
I do speak to organizations, so putting that kind of content out there. People ask if I'm writing another book solo, and I say I've not closed the door, but I'm not really quite at the point where I know what that's going to be yet.
Sure. Well, that's exciting. It's always exciting to know that as you continue to learn and develop yourself, that you're going to have things out there that you're going to put out that people are interested in. So I'm excited to see what's next for sure.
Thank you. I'm excited to see what's next too, because quite honestly, at every stage of my life, I could never have told you what was next,
Sure.
right?
Well, I would ask you kind of what you would be doing if this wasn't what your life was kind of tangled up in, is the growth and development of business owners. But it seems like it would be still within that growth, development, and personal goal setting in kind of whatever avenue in life, whether you decided to take that to, a health and wellness space, or
Mhm.
a family or a child or a teen type of development space. It seems like that you were kind of destined to find what niche it was going to be that you were going to hone into and see what value you could bring there. So I think that we kind of share that in common. I think that I've been in this business for almost 5 years now, and I've really kind of developed a passion for not only helping businesses with their business services and kind of setting them up for success, but also
Mhm.
it's been very rewarding and satisfying to be a vessel that people can lean on to try and spread the message about what they're trying to build to sustain
Mhm.
the growth and happiness of the people that they care about. So it's been a very satisfying and informative kind of process of my own. And I think that we have a lot of those same kind of mission qualities.
Wonderful. Yeah. I loved what you said about being the vessel that can help other people get their message out there, because I think at some level, we are all vessels
Sure.
to help get, and we think it's our message, but it's a message that needs to be out there. So, how do we help use our personal vessel to get that message out there? I think
Sure.
that's a great analogy.
How do we get in touch with you if someone that's listening to the podcast or someone on our network
Yeah.
wants to get in contact with you?
So one of two ways are probably the best ways. My website is rebel success for leaders with an s.com. You can reach out to me there from the contact me page or the newsletter. I'm also on LinkedIn. That's my primary social media platform. I'm on the others, but my primary one is LinkedIn. So I'd love for you to connect with me there. Let me know you saw me on Burn the Ship, and I'd love to chat about anything you want to chat about.
Sure. And then tell us just in a few words here, kind of what burning the ship has done for you. What jumping off into your own business and kind of committing to that lifestyle of bringing value to people that need the type of content that you put out. What effect has that had on you? And kind of what would you say to the people that are listening to this podcast, kind of mulling over their options about starting their own business?
I would say it's kind of an analogy to burn the ship, but what I would say is you don't need to carry the bricks you don't need to carry, right? So when you burn that ship and you kind of close the door, turn the page, whatever analogy we want to use, you're not carrying a bunch of baggage or a bunch of stuff that you don't need anymore
Right.
because you were made to go forward. You were not made to go backwards. So however you go forward, you need to get rid of the stuff you don't need and you need to find new stuff that helps you, or just go without stuff, right? So I think for me, it has been extremely freeing to like close the door, however scary that was at any point in time. But it's light. It's very light, not having to carry that anymore. It's
Sure.
amazing.
Sure. Well, I thank you for coming on today. I really do appreciate the time that you've given us and the content that you've shared with us. I hope some people in our audience found the value the way that we did, and I hope to continue this conversation and bring some value to each other.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you as well.